The rain came down in thick sheets, turning the jungle floor into a mire of mud and decay. Cyril's sleek silver boots sank into the sludge as she took her first step out of the craft. Her people had assured her this mission was pointless. Another waste of resources to explore a primitive backwater inhabited by a species that barely qualified as sentient. Earth, they said, was a relic, a living museum of evolution gone wrong. But Cyril didn't believe in dismissing anything without first-hand knowledge. The jungle stretched endlessly around her, a chaotic sprawl of towering trees, tangled vines, and shrieking life forms that echoed in the humid air. The bioluminescent canopy glowed faintly with hues of green and violet, a mesmerizing display of Earth's bizarre ecosystem. Her craft, a smooth, egg-like structure, hovered silently above the ground, its metallic surface reflecting the pulsating light. Cyril adjusted her exosuit, its thin layer of nanotech sealing her against the harsh environment. Her skin, faintly shimmering and iridescent, was salient, evolved for efficiency and adaptability. Her silver hair, long and fluid like living metal, flowed behind her as she stepped forward, scanning the terrain with her handheld device. The scanner buzzed softly, analyzing the density of life forms around her. It pinged, a concentrated group of humanoid heat signatures less than a kilometer away. Her violet eyes narrowed as she tapped the device, marking the location. She began her trek, her every movement precise and deliberate. Her people, the Scialians, prided themselves on logic and reason, dismissing emotion as a weakness. Cyril was no different, or so she had thought. Yet, standing amidst the raw chaos of Earth, she felt something she couldn't quite define, a sense of unease, an undercurrent of curiosity. The jungle was alive in a way no other world she had visited was. The plants seemed to breathe, their leaves shifting and curling as if observing her. Small, glowing insects buzzed around her, their soft light contrasting the dark underbrush. A low growl echoed in the distance, and she paused, her hand instinctively reaching for the pulse weapon at her side. Primitive or not, Earth was dangerous. Her scanner pinged again, louder this time. The heat signatures were closer, their patterns erratic. She crouched low, her lithe form blending into the shadows. Peering through the dense foliage, she saw them, humans. They were gathered by the river, their figures silhouetted against the shimmering water. There were 5 of them, their bodies lean and muscular, their clothes patched and worn. They moved with purpose, their gestures animated as they worked together to secure a net stretched across the river's width. Fish swam desperately against the barrier, their silvery forms glinting in the moonlight. Cyril's scanner buzzed, analyzing their behavior. Cooperative effort, problem-solving, resourcefulness. These were traits her people dismissed as unremarkable. Yet watching the humans interact, she couldn't deny the complexity of their actions. They laughed, their voices carrying across the water, and she felt an unfamiliar pang in her chest. One of the humans stood apart from the others, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He was taller than the rest, his broad shoulders and strong posture radiating confidence. His dark hair was damp, clinging to his face, and his sharp features were illuminated by the moonlight. He exuded a quiet intensity that drew her attention, and for a moment, she forgot her purpose. Her scanner buzzed urgently, pulling her back to reality. She tapped the device, silencing it, but the noise had already alerted them. The group turned, their eyes scanning the jungle. The tall one stepped forward, his hand resting on a crude but effective blade strapped to his waist. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice deep and steady. Cyril hesitated. She was cloaked in an advanced camouflage field, her presence invisible to the human eye, yet his gaze seemed to pierce through the underbrush, landing directly on her hidden form. Her heart raced, a strange sensation she couldn't explain. "Show yourself," he demanded, his tone firm but not unkind. Against her better judgment, she deactivated the cloak. The humans gasped as she stepped into the moonlight, her otherworldly appearance unmistakable. Her shimmering skin and flowing silver hair seemed to mesmerize them, and for a moment, there was only silence. The tall one didn't react with fear or aggression. Instead, he tilted his head, his dark eyes narrowing as he studied her. "You're not from around here," he said, his lips curving into a faint smirk. Cyril straightened, her voice calm and authoritative. I am here to observe. Nothing more. He stepped closer, his movements cautious but deliberate. The others stayed back, their murmurs barely audible as they watched the exchange. Observe what? He asked, his gaze unwavering. You, she replied simply. He chuckled, a deep, rich sound that sent a strange warmth through her. Well, you picked an interesting place to start. Cyril frowned, unsure how to interpret his reaction. Humans were supposed to be primitive, ruled by instinct and emotion. Yet his demeanor was composed, his intelligence evident in his measured words. He extended a hand, a universal gesture she recognized as an offering of peace. I'm Daniel, he said. And you are? She hesitated before answering. Cyril. Well, Cyril, he said, his smirk widening. Welcome to Earth. Cyril followed Daniel as he led her through the dense jungle, the canopy above casting fragmented beams of moonlight onto the uneven ground. The humans in his group had dispersed, retreating to their modest camp, but Daniel had stayed behind, curious and unwilling to let her disappear without understanding who or what she was. Cyril's scanner buzzed softly at her side, registering his presence. His biological readings were unlike any species she had encountered, his body resilient and adaptable, his mind emitting a faint yet constant electrical signal. She had studied countless creatures across the galaxy, but there was something unique about humans, an energy that defied categorization. Do you always stare like that? Or is it just me? Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts, a teasing edge to his tone. She blinked, startled. I am analyzing your physiology, she replied. Her voice clipped. She had intended it to sound clinical, but his laugh suggested he wasn't taking her seriously. Well, I hope you're finding what you're looking for, he said, stepping over a large root with practiced ease, though most people just ask questions if they're curious. Cyril frowned. Asking would imply a mutual exchange of knowledge. I am here to observe, not to engage. Right, Daniel said, glancing back at her with a lopsided grin, because spying on people from the bushes is way less engaging. Cyril opened her mouth to retort but stopped when they emerged into a clearing. The jungle gave way to a sprawling view of the river, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. A small camp sat nestled on the bank, its simple structures made of wood and metal, with a central fire crackling softly in the center. The smell of cooked fish lingered in the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the jungle. This is where we've been staying, Daniel said, gesturing toward the camp. Not much, but it keeps us safe. Cyril studied the scene, her gaze lingering on the crude shelters and the humans gathered around the fire. They laughed and talked, their faces lit by the warm glow. She had read about human social structures, their reliance on community and connection, but seeing it firsthand was disarming. Why do you live like this? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Your technology is insufficient. Daniel raised an eyebrow, folding his arms across his chest. Insufficient for what? We've got shelter, food, and each other. What more do we need? Cyril's gaze flicked to the fire, her thoughts swirling. Comfort, security, efficiency. Sounds boring, Daniel said with a shrug. If everything's perfect all the time, where's the challenge? The adventure? Cyril turned to him, her expression unreadable. You see adversity as desirable? Daniel met her gaze, his dark eyes steady. Adversity makes us stronger. It's what pushes us to keep going, to find solutions, to evolve. Without it, we'd stagnate. His words resonated in a way she couldn't explain. Her people had eliminated adversity long ago, creating a society devoid of struggle or conflict. They saw it as an achievement, the pinnacle of civilization. Yet standing here, listening to Daniel speak with such conviction, she couldn't help but wonder if they had lost something in the process. Come on, Daniel said, breaking the silence. You must be starving. I don't know what aliens eat, but we've got plenty of fish. Cyril hesitated. She wasn't programmed for this, sharing meals, engaging in casual conversation, but something about Daniel's easy demeanor made her want to try. She followed him to the fire, her presence drawing curious glances from the others. They didn't speak to her, their awe and apprehension evident, but they didn't seem hostile. Daniel handed her a makeshift plate, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The sensation sent a strange warmth through her, and she quickly looked away, focusing on the food. It was simple, a grilled fish seasoned with herbs, but the flavors were unlike anything she had experienced. She chewed thoughtfully, her enhanced taste receptors analyzing the complex layers. Good, right? Daniel said, his grin returning. Told you we're not as primitive as you think. Cyril didn't answer, her mind too preoccupied with the realization that humans, for all their unpredictability, were far more intricate than her people had believed. The morning came slowly, the sun filtering through the dense jungle canopy in golden shafts of light. The camp was already stirring by the time Cyril woke, her internal systems alerting her to the shift in the environment. She had spent the night in one of the humans' crude shelters, her body perfectly calibrated to endure the less than optimal conditions. Still, it was the first time in years she had felt truly rested, though she wouldn't admit it. Outside, the humans were preparing for their day. Daniel was at the riverbank, his sleeves rolled up as he worked on repairing a fishing net. Sarah watched him from the shadows of her shelter, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had come to this planet to confirm humanity's insignificance, to prove to her people that Earth and its inhabitants were nothing more than an evolutionary fluke. Instead, she had found something extraordinary. Good morning, Daniel called out, his voice cutting through her reverie. He waved her over with a smile, his easy demeanor unchanged despite her alien origins. Cyril hesitated before stepping into the light. Morning, she said stiffly, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. She walked to the riverbank, her gaze flicking to the humans who watched her with a mix of curiosity and caution. They had accepted her presence, but their wariness was palpable. Daniel handed her a section of the net, his hands rough but steady. Think you can handle this? He asked, his tone light but his eyes challenging. Cyril took the net without a word, her enhanced dexterity allowing her to mimic his movements with ease. As they worked, Daniel glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. You're different, he said finally. Not just because you're, an alien, but you're not like the others we've met. Cyril's hands paused, the net slipping slightly before she caught it. Others? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Daniel nodded. There have been sightings. Ships, strange lights, even encounters. But they never stay long, and they're not interested in talking. You're the first one who stuck around. Cyril looked away, her mind racing. The Saalians had strict protocols for planetary observation, and direct contact was forbidden. If other species had been here, it meant Earth was more significant than anyone realized. She would have to report this to her superiors if she ever returned. Why did you come here? Daniel asked, his voice softer now. I mean, really, what are you looking for? Cyril met his gaze, her glowing eyes narrowing. I came to observe, to understand. And what do you understand now? He pressed. She hesitated, her usual confidence faltering. That your kind is more complex than we believed. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. That's the polite way of saying we're a mess. Cyril frowned. Your species is unpredictable, emotional, and chaotic, but you are also resourceful, resilient, and capable of forming bonds that defy logic. Daniel smiled, his dark eyes warm. That's what makes us human. The moment hung between them, a fragile connection that neither could fully articulate. Cyril felt a strange pull, an instinct she didn't recognize but couldn't ignore. Her people had abandoned emotion long ago, deeming it a weakness. But standing here, she realized it was humanity's greatest strength. The sound of crashing branches shattered the moment. Cyril's head snapped up, her senses heightened as her scanner buzzed frantically. A large predator emerged from the jungle, its sleek, reptilian body glistening with moisture, its eyes locked onto them, its movements predatory and deliberate. Run, Daniel shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the camp. The humans scattered, their shouts echoing through the trees as the predator charged. Cyril's enhanced reflexes kicked in, her body moving with precision as she calculated the creature's trajectory. But Daniel was already ahead, his movements driven by instinct rather than logic. Get to the ship, he yelled, shoving her toward her craft. Cyril hesitated, her mind torn. Her mission dictated that she prioritize her own safety, but she couldn't leave him behind. Against every protocol, every rule she had been taught, she turned back. The predator lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Daniel's leg. Cyril moved without thinking, her pulse weapon drawn and firing in one fluid motion. The creature howled, its body convulsing before it collapsed. Lifeless, Daniel stared at her, his chest heaving. "Remind me not to underestimate you," he said, his voice breathless but steady. Cyril lowered her weapon, her hands trembling. "You would have done the same." He smiled, his expression softening. "Maybe, but not with that much style." The humans gathered around them, their faces a mix of awe and gratitude. Cyril's presence had shifted from an anomaly to an ally, her actions proving her worth in their eyes. But as the danger subsided, she felt the weight of her decision. She had crossed a line, one that could not be undone. As the sun set over the jungle, Daniel sat beside her near the fire, his voice quiet. "You didn't have to save me." "Yes, I did," she replied, her gaze fixed on the flames. "You've shown me something I never expected to find." "What's that?" he asked, leaning closer. "Hope," she said simply, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to feel alive. The jungle was quiet now, the chaos of the day fading into the soft hum of nighttime life. Cyril stood at the edge of the camp, her ship gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The humans were asleep, their breathing even and peaceful, all except one. Daniel approached her slowly, his footsteps deliberate but soft on the forest floor. He carried 2 steaming cups, the earthy aroma of coffee drifting toward her. Cyril tilted her head as he extended one toward her, his lopsided grin breaking the tension. "You never did say if you liked this stuff," he said, his tone playful but curious. Cyril accepted the cup, her fingers brushing his briefly. She studied the dark liquid, its heat warming her hand. "It is unlike anything we have on sale," she said, taking a sip. The bitter taste was sharp but invigorating, a reflection of the planet itself. "It suits your world," Daniel chuckled, sitting on a log beside her. "High praise. Coming from you." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly behind them. Cyril's ship loomed in the distance, its presence a reminder of the life she was supposed to return to. A life governed by logic, rules, and sterile perfection. But after everything she had seen, after everything she had felt, the thought of leaving felt hollow. "I sent my report," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I told them Earth is more than they believed, that humanity isn't exceptional." Daniel turned to her, his expression unreadable. "What happens now?" Cyril looked up at the stars, their light fractured by the thick canopy above. "They will send others. Scientists, diplomats, perhaps even soldiers. They will want to understand what I have seen." "And you?" Daniel asked, his voice soft but insistent. "What do you want?" Cyril hesitated, the question striking deeper than she expected. What did she want? For so long, her purpose had been defined by her people, her role as an observer and analyst. But now, standing on this chaotic, beautiful planet, she realized she wanted something more. "I want to stay," she said, her words a whisper, but they carried the weight of a decision made deep within her. "There is more to learn here than I ever imagined." Daniel's smile was faint but genuine, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not going to regret it." Cyril met his gaze, her glowing violet eyes softening. "Neither will you." The night stretched on as they sat together, their connection unspoken but undeniable. For Cyril, this was no longer just a mission. It was a new beginning, one filled with uncertainty, challenge, and the kind of beauty she had spent her life trying to understand. And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, illuminating the lush jungle in golden light, she felt something she had never experienced before.